Fainting Snippets. So this is the series on POTS, and we were talking about why some people may be more likely to have symptom flares or exacerbations in their symptoms. So, Trish, you once mentioned something about the material circumstances in which you're living, so where you are in life, can have an impact on your symptoms and how you experience the condition. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think an illness or a condition is never just simply about the biology and about the physiology. It's about how you interpret it, but also that is a function of who you are, and who you are is not just a bunch of cells and bodily parts. It's your social experience, it's where you live, it's where you work, it's your family life, it's your relationships, it's your previous experience of an illness, it's your ability to, for example, what type of job that you do. If you're lucky to have work, do you have an employer? Are you on a 0 hours contract? In which case you don't have the ability to stay at home when you don't feel very well, or pace yourself, or work from home. It's work or not work. Are you in a job where you can work from home? Are you in a job where you have an understanding manager? How much control do you have on that in terms of when you work and how you work? Are you office-based, or are you sedentary, or you have to be upon work? So simple things like that have an impact clearly on how you can manage your symptoms and what you can change about your life and what you can't. So that in turn will have an impact on your spending power, on how you're worried about bills, or what you can do with the children, if you have a car. All these things have an impact in terms of the simple things of how you can manage those symptoms and how you experience them. Having a lift to a hospital appointment, for example, because you have a car, is different to having to take 3 buses to get to that appointment. So it's not all about symptoms that we all experience the same way. It's a function of all many different things which can impact on people.
You've said something that really makes it very complex, and bringing the physical, psychosocial model into this equation, and to not kind of simplify or dumb down POTS so much as we talk about the mechanistic aspects of blood pooling, adrenaline surge, and tachycardia, because there is so much more, and everything you say is true. I would just like to bring into the equation that all these factors that you're talking about does influence our kind of primitive brain, our amygdala, our autonomic center, which controls some of these responses to reactions to standing, and not only to standing, but to emotional or physical work. And our kind of dial-up adrenaline system, or the reactivity, which is a bit perhaps dialed higher than most because of the psychosocial physical interactions that Trish talked about, may be influencing how POTS patients have their experience of symptoms.
And we know that in that state we have high adrenaline, you're also perhaps more sensitized to a lot of the symptoms. But if you're feeling stressed, as we know, it can also induce that, it might make you more sensitized to your symptoms.
Yeah, it all seems like a vicious cycle, right? Well, because if you think about it, you have the circumstances which are very provoking and very jarring on your autonomic nervous system. And then, goodness me, you now stand up and then you provoke that sympathetic surge, which then makes you even more reactive to the environment, or to the bill that's just come in your door, to the fact that you've got to go to hospital now and take 3 buses. Now, that spiraling or sense of loss of control is a very important factor to consider, and we have to understand as healthcare givers that it's not all about just saying, come in, have a look here, blood pressure is a bit low, heart rate is a bit high, take a beta blocker, job done, all will be okay. It's not so simple, and we need to wake up to that reality.
And we need to work out how we break that cycle. Any ideas?
Well, education. Sometimes it is. We can talk about dynamics of how things can escalate as well, and it's that contradiction. I think sometimes, for example, when you're dealing with perhaps a team and very supportive family members, but that anxiety that a parent may have, you know, that you're fighting, you're doing your best, and perhaps you've come through a long road really to get a diagnosis, to get your child the help that they need, and you're very cognizant, very aware of how it might impact their schooling, or if it's an important school year, or how it affects their grades or their social life, and you see that, and you're very, you feel very much for your child. But in having that anxiety, that's very easy to transfer then onto the child, and then it does become an added stress.
Yeah, so Trish, this is super interesting. And I think you have got a good spidey sense here when we've spoken about tilt table testing in this particular cohort of patients, and I've developed that spidey sense as well. But you can see a very well-meaning parent, and you can see a child that's oblivious to the fact that there is this inherent feeling stress, but not overt. Or not overtly displayed, but the undertones to every interaction between a parent and a child is one of stress and expectations which are unmet. And it's how you break that cycle, because you're only here in the room with them for, say, an hour and a half when you're doing the tilt. I'm only in clinic with them for half an hour. And yet there's so much, almost a lifetime of relationships to unpick. And oftentimes it's the parents that you need to really change the expectations and the behavior, because the team is the team. Children don't sometimes know any better, as I find in my own child. They don't know adversity because that's how it's been presented to them. It's the parents' overlay of what the child is missing or what they are going to miss in the future that adds to the feeling of stress. And sometimes that's unsaid. But this sense, this feeling, Trish, that you have just through body language and just knowing the interactions is incredible.
And so I suppose there's something about all of us in our, whatever we are, whether we're clinicians or parents or patients, is just trying to reflect on how much of that and how much expectation we put on ourselves and our loved ones, and how much judgment perhaps we put. And we've talked in other sessions on wellness about the concept of having an open mind and awareness and taking a mindful approach to your symptoms and your attitudes, and it's something that we can maybe touch on.
So I go slightly beyond that and saying, and it may sound a bit woo, but instead of taking an open mind approach, have an open heart approach, because the mindset in this particular circumstance is going to be influenced by a feeling or a heart set. And actually, whatever we try and intellectualize and eventually verbalize, which is the form of communication we know exists and which we feel is one of the most important ways to communicate with our children or to each other, is so influenced by how we feel that we don't pick up on the subtle clues. So it's super important to feel in yourself as a parent or as a caregiver that you don't have such an overwhelmingly unrealistic expectation,